On Resolve Problem segment tonight, the blatant media bias in America continues. As you know, the murder of late-term abortionist Dr. George Tiller in Kansas was widely covered in the mainstream media, front-page news in the New York Times, for example. But the murder of Private William Long in Arkansas by an American Muslim was put on page 16 by the Times. On the TV news front, the evening news on CBS and ABC totally ignored the Private Long story. NBC gave it seconds. All three networks extensively covered Tiller. So what's going on? With us now, senior editor at Editor and Publisher magazine, Joe Strupp. And from Indianapolis, Dr. Jeff McCall, a journalism professor at DePauw University and author of the book, Viewer Discretion Advised, Taking Control of Mass Media Influences. All right, Doctor, begin with you. So why did Tiller get all the ink, as they say in the news business, and Private Long was pretty much ignored?
Well, Bill, no two stories are the same. That's one thing to start off with, and we don't want every story covered through a template. And these stories are different in that Tiller is probably a more high-profile person than Private Long. But there are similarities in these stories. Number one, they're both heinous crimes, and there are political overtones to both of these stories. And having said that, the coverage has not been nearly the same. As you indicated, the coverage has been much different in volume and much different in tone. I think there could be a couple of different reasons for that. But one thing I think is worth pointing out is that the press generally in recent years, or I should say in recent months, has given the Obama administration a relatively soft ride. And that's not just me saying, that's the Pew Research Center saying that, the Center for Media and Public Affairs. Right. They've given them a relatively soft ride. And one thing I think is relevant here is that while the Obama administration has worked very hard to try to build bridges with the Muslim community, and Obama, in fact, even now the president is in the Middle East trying to build bridges with the Muslim community, I think it doesn't fit the narrative of the media.
All right, so you say there's a political reason that they want to de-emphasize. To come in. Yeah, and I mean, one network actually wouldn't use the guy's, he's a convert to Islam, and they wouldn't use his Muslim name. They kept calling him Carlos Bledsoe. I think there's another thing in play here, Joe. I think that the liberal media feels very passionate about abortion and abortion rights, as they put it, reproductive rights, whatever the phrase is this week. Very passionate to protect that. Not so passionate about the military. What say you?
I think it's the fact that it is sort of two different things, and you have abortion, which, as you know, is the hot-button issue. You have this doctor who'd been attacked in the past. He was shot in a church, of all places. It was on a Sunday, a slow news day. This is something that divides families. This issue. People want to hear more and more. Was it overcovered? I think it was overcovered.
I don't think so.
I think a lot of things are overcovered.
I'm not saying it was overcovered.
And I think this other story was undercovered.
Joe,
I agree with that, too.
Once you inject me into it, it becomes a huge
your
story.
story. I agree.
But I don't think it was overcovered. I think the Tiller coverage was all right because it was shocking.
Right.
It was shocking. But I was shocked that an Army recruiter in Arkansas got gunned down by some Muslim terrorist in the United States, and I can't find any info about it.
No, but the info was out there. I did a search myself, found more than 1,000 stories. I found a lot more stories on Tiller, found a lot more stories on things like
CBS and ABC News didn't cover it at all.
I'm not going to give network television as much credit as I give my newspapers.
That's where Americans get their news.
And also the cable channels as well. They're over-covering things like this all the time.
Not this one, not Sergeant Long.
Things get over-covered all the time.
Look,
doesn't mean it's right, I agree.
On CNN,
but you can point to a lot of issues where that happens.
CNN is supposed to be the news channel.
Isn't Fox and MSNBC supposed to be?
No, but CNN says, look, we don't do opinion. We do news. Only Anderson Cooper at 10 o'clock covered the story.
Right.
Nobody else.
You're right.
So all day long it wasn't news to cover an Army recruiter gunned down in Arkansas. Now, there's something else in play here, Doctor. What's in play is the zealotry on the part of the editors in the newspapers and the producers on television to promote abortion rights. That's what this is all about. Because you know, and I'm sure you know, Joe, if you read the coverage, the late-term abortion was diminished. He was an abortion doctor. He was a mainstream guy when he wasn't. He was an extreme guy, one of only 3 in the country. That's what I think drove this Tiller story. And again, the hook on the poor private murdered, there was no hook. What are we going to do? Bash Muslims? As you said, that's not in the narrative. But let's deal with the intensity of the Tiller situation. It was driven by the abortion rights crew, was it not?
Well, Bill, certainly there's a lot of emotion in the abortion story. And you've talked recently several times about the changing standards in journalism. And I think we're seeing in this particular case where the story is being covered through a political lens, and it gets right down to the wording of how the stories are covered.
Absolutely.
And let me give
right.
an example from an NBC story yesterday morning on one of their morning newscasts. In talking about the Private Long murder, it said, police say the suspect was upset with the military. Well, that's like saying that the murderer of Tiller was just upset with the medical community, and it leaves
But see,
out
I don't
a very
even
important element of the story.
object to that, Doctor. I don't even object to the phraseology or all of that. What I object to is, and you hit it, the politicization of hard news. And there's no doubt in my mind that is now happening in America. I'm going to give Joe the last word.
That happens in a lot of places, but I do think there was the fact that he was late-term abortion doctor was put out there in the reports that I saw. And again, this is a hot-button issue.
Put out there by me.
That's what gets a lot of the attention. Hot-button versus political, one way or the other.
I think the murder of an Army recruiter, 23 years old, is a hot-button issue, Joe.
You could be agreed with.
Okay? I think it's a real hot-button issue. And we're glad that we covered it here, and we feel very bad for both the families of both men, Tiller and the private who were murdered. Gentlemen, thanks very much. Plenty more ahead as the Factor moves along this evening. Monica Crowley is mad about gas prices going up, and Alan Colmes is angry that President Obama's New York date trip was criticized. They will be here. And so will Dennis Miller, who has some comments on Eminem getting Borated at the MTV Awards. Uh-oh. We hope you stay tuned for those reports.